There's 6 ME 109 at 3 o'clock.
Keep after him, would you?
I see him. I'm on him. Come on, you.
On February 1st, 1943, a dramatic event occurred, leaving a historical mark that will be remembered forever. A mid-air collision took place between a B-17 aircraft and a German fighter plane over the Tunis harbor area. This incident became one of the most famous photos of World War II. In the photo, the tail of the B-17 is seen severely torn, almost detached from the aircraft's body. This B-17 was initially produced at the Boeing plant in Seattle, Washington, and joined the US Air Force with serial number 4124406. After being processed at several bases, the aircraft finally arrived in England on August 21, 1942, and began conducting daylight bombing missions in Nazi-occupied Europe. In November 1942, All-American was transferred to the 12th Air Force to support the Allied landings in North Africa during Operation Torch. On November 20, 1942, the aircraft departed from England to Algeria, and by Christmas 1942, the 97th Bomb Group, including All-American, was flying from Biskra, Algeria. Despite the difficult conditions at the desert base and frequent attacks by the Germans, the crew of this aircraft continued their missions and eventually helped force the Axis forces out of North Africa. On February 1, 1943, a major mission was carefully prepared. The crew of the B-17 Flying Fortress, nicknamed All-American, was preparing to carry out one of their most important missions. This mission would not only test their flying skills, but also their courage in facing deadly threats in the skies over North Africa. The crew of the All-American was tasked with bombing the German-controlled ports of Bizerte and Tunis, Tunisia. These ports were vital to Germany and Italy, especially in supporting the already severely limited logistics of Field Marshal Erwin Rommel in North Africa. All-American took position behind and to the right of the lead aircraft Flaming Mamie, piloted by Major Robert Coulter. In the pre-mission briefing, it was stated that they would meet the 301st Bomb Group and P-38 Lightning escort aircraft. However, the aircraft from the 301st kept deviating from the established route toward Tunis. Major Coulter decided to stay on the direct route to Tunis, even though they eventually became separated from the 301st and P-38. The journey to the target grew increasingly tense as they began to face attacks from Messerschmitt Bf-109s, particularly from Jagdgeschwader 53. The Bf-109 was known as a sky killer, and each of its attacks could end the lives of the crew in an instant. Amid the chaos of the air battle, the crew of the All-American fought with all their might, firing machine guns in all directions, trying to fend off every approaching enemy fighter. But the situation turned dire as the bombers came within range of German anti-aircraft guns on the ground. Despite having to endure heavy flak, the 97th Bomb Group's formation reached the target area and successfully dropped their bombs from an altitude of 20,000 feet. Then the formation planned a new route back to Biskra. However, in the distance, two black dots appeared, moving quickly and dangerously. These were two Messerschmitt Bf-109s, legendary fighter planes piloted by German aces Oberleutnant Julius Meinberg and Feldwebel Erich Patzia. They flew with the intent of intercepting and destroying the B-17 on its return journey. Meinberg directed his aircraft to attack from the front, the least protected area of the B-17. Despite receiving return fire from All-American and Flaming Mamie, Meinberg managed to fire his weapons at the lead aircraft before his oxygen tank was hit, causing a fire and forcing Meinberg to bail out of his aircraft. Meanwhile, on the other side of the battle, Erich Patzia locked his sights on the All-American. Patzia attempted to attack the All-American, but was hit by return fire that was either fatal or severely wounded him, causing him to lose control of his aircraft. As Patzia tried to avoid a collision, one of his wings sliced through the tail of the All-American, while the rest fell to the desert floor. Inside the All-American, everyone heard a loud whoomph and felt the aircraft shake and dive. After the horrific collision, the crew of the All-American realized that the left side of the aircraft's tail was completely destroyed, with the left horizontal stabilizer entirely missing, leaving only a few remnants of the frame and metal skin. There were just enough control cables left to maneuver the remaining rudder and elevator, and they also managed to use the analog autopilot system on the Norden bomb site to keep the aircraft stable and set its flight direction. With Biskra still about 90 minutes of flight away and no serious injuries among the crew, the initial thought was to bail out using parachutes, as it seemed safer. However, everyone decided to stay on board, especially since they were still over German-controlled territory. Several aircraft in their formation slowed down to ensure the All-American didn't fall too far behind and become a target for German fighter planes. Inside the B-17 flying flit gun, Navigator Lieutenant Charles Cliff Cutforth took a camera and captured the iconic scene that later became famous. The photo shows the severely wounded All-American flying with only half of its tail, like a crippled iron bird refusing to surrender to its fate. After they passed out of range of the German fighter planes, the other aircraft in the formation sped up to land at Biskra before All-American. Before landing, the crew fired 3 flares from the aircraft over the airfield to signal that they were making an emergency landing. The pilot gave the crew the option to bail out over the airfield, but every crew member chose to stay on board. After all the other B-17s landed, the airfield was cleared, ambulances stood by, and the crews who had already landed watched anxiously from the ground as the All-American came in for a landing. The pilot and co-pilot carefully lowered the main landing gear and flaps to test if the aircraft still responded. And fortunately, it did. However, the tail wheel was inoperative due to the collision, so the severely damaged tail had to bear the landing load as they made a long, slow approach. With remarkable skill and composure, the pilot and co-pilot of the All-American managed to bring the aircraft to a steady landing. All the crew on board, though exhausted and shaken, survived one of the most thrilling and dangerous flights of their lives.